rebellion cost? That's a question Andor never stops asking. Not with blasters, not with lightsabers, but with silence, with sacrifices, and with consequences. In a galaxy where hope is a whisper and control is law, this is the cost. Welcome to Thanks, I'll Take It From Here, the podcast where we dig into the stories that stay with us long after the credits roll. Today we dive into Andor, a series that didn't just tell a Star Wars story, it redefined what Star Wars could be. No Jedi, no chosen one, just a man, a cause, and a question. How far are you willing to go to be free? This bonus episode isn't just a recap, it's a breakdown, and I'll cover some themes that I thought hit really hard, some character arcs that I thought was incredibly compelling, some of the behind the scenes choices that you might have missed, a few what ifs, and then lingering question marks that I have after seeing both seasons. And I'll briefly talk on Tales of the Underworld and its connection to the Star Wars franchise as a whole, and also Andor. So before we dive into the characters and the plot, we need to talk about how Andor was made, because this show doesn't just feel different, it is different. Original showrunner Tony Gilroy planned Andor as a 5-season arc. 5 years, 5 seasons, each one showing Cassian's path towards Rogue One, but here's what changed. Making 5 seasons would have taken nearly a decade, and Gilroy and Diego Luna both said nobody wanted to still be doing this in 2032. The writers also realized they could tell the same emotional journey with more intensity by compressing time. So season 1 covers 1 year, but then season 2 is 4 years told in 4 3-episode arcs. The results? I think a tighter, more urgent narrative, no filler, just momentum. And I think what they wanted to accomplish, they accomplished. So now let's talk about the aesthetics. Production designer Luke Hall didn't just build sets, he built environments. Gorman, Coruscant, Yavin 4. Every location feels massive, industrial, and lived in. And one big reason is because they didn't use the volume. If you're not familiar, the volume is the huge LED stage behind The Mandalorian. It creates digital environments in real time. Disney has used this for a few of their projects. It's pretty slick, and it's really cool that they can basically simulate this environment just digitally, but sometimes it does feel a bit too polished. And I like that in Andor, they said they will not use that. So they built real sets, real dirt, real shadows, and real consequences. And that grit you feel on screen, that's because they really put boots on the actual ground. So let's now talk about what this season is really doing, because Andor isn't just telling a Star Wars story, it's really dismantling one. No lightsabers, no prophecies, no chosen ones, just regular people, tired, pissed off people trying to carve freedom out of a system designed to crush them. And it keeps asking, who resists, who survives, and who sacrifices so someone else can live? Because Andor makes one thing brutally clear: sacrifice isn't poetic, it's policy. The kind that leaves bodies in its wake. So the theme of sacrifice is seen throughout the series. Luthen is a toxic king. He lies, manipulates, kills with surgical precision, and I still rooted for him like I was collecting loyalty points. He's not here for hope. He's not here for leverage. He'll burn 10 lives to delay the Empire by 5 minutes and still walk away like, you're welcome. And somehow we eat it up. Why? Because at least he's honest about being morally bankrupt, and that's character development. Now, Mon is a masterclass in quiet devastation. She trades her daughter's future for rebel funding, then sips cocktails with the very men she's plotting to dismantle. She never yells, she never flinches, she plays 5 games at once: diplomacy, money laundering, emotional suppression, family control, and the slow art of not screaming at dinner. She's unbothered, she's moisturized, and she's elegant. All right, she is a queen. And then we get Val, who gave up privilege for purpose, luxury for risk. And when she chooses the rebellion, she didn't just lose comfort, she lost connections. Her relationship with Cinta, it didn't explode, it eroded. The mission always came first until she didn't know where she ended and the fight began. That brings us to Cassian. He gave up everything that let him vanish. His past, his safety, his I'm not involved mindset. But not necessarily because he found hope, but because he finally ran out of excuses not to fight. All of these characters had to sacrifice something in some way, shape, or form. I would say the next big theme of the show is control and identity. Syril as a character is what happens when corporate energy goes untreated. So he gets fired, sent home, lives with his emotionally unavailable mom who serves psychological warfare for breakfast, and instead of moving on, he doubles down. He clings to structure, status. His arc is like watching someone join LinkedIn for emotional support. And I can't mention him and not Dedra. She is terrifyingly competent and obsessed. She's that kind of coworker who volunteers to work on weekends for fun. When she and Syril lock eyes, it feels like two malfunctioning droids. Watching them flirt is like watching two spreadsheets argue over chain of command. Like, imagine being stuck on a double date with them at mini golf. You'd leave with a nervous twitch and probably a subpoena. And together, I don't think they're necessarily villains. Like, sure, that's what the show is making them out to be as like the TV show villains. But I think they're what the Empire cultivates. And that's obsession, obedience, and a deeply unsettling lack of social skills. I think the third big theme of this series is moral ambiguity. This show doesn't hand you clean moral lines. It hands you a mop and it says, good luck, babe. Clea orders hits like she's just adjusting a calendar. Zero hesitation, zero remorse. Luthen let an entire rebel cell die to protect one informant. One, he ends up killing himself later and then just clocks out like it's a normal Tuesday. Cassian, oh, he kills. He is the blade of Luthen. He kills anyone who hesitates at the wrong time. And he doesn't spiral, he doesn't blink, he just does what needs to be done. Now, these people aren't your moral compass. They're not the light in the dark. They're not necessarily inspirational. They're just who was left. Andor doesn't romanticize rebellion. It doesn't say, look how it starts. It says, here's what it takes. It's not about victory. It's about loss. And the brutal, necessary question, is it still worth it once everything's done? Now that we unpacked what rebellions look like from the ground up in Andor, I want to pivot because another series hit a surprisingly similar nerve, and that's Tales of the Underworld. If you haven't seen Tales of the Underworld, it was released on May 4th on Star Wars Day, and it is an animated anthology that dives into the galaxy's gutters with bounty hunters, mercs, morally gray legends doing deeply questionable things, and just showing how complex they are. But I think beneath the blasters and the grit, one thing stood out to me from that series, and that's abandonment. It's a theme in Andor, and it also shows up in Tales of the Underworld. For example, in Andor, Luthen leaves people behind just by design. That is the nature of his rebellion. Mon, she sacrifices her daughter's future for rebel funds, then disappears to Yavin 4 without her family. Cassian, he dies before he even met his child. And in Tales of the Underworld, that's echoed again, especially in the final episodes. There's a gut-wrenching storyline where Cad Bane unknowingly kills a man who raised the son he never knew he had. And that man was his best friend. And when he found out that that was his son, he just walked away, abandoning his child. Different character, but same pattern. Across the franchise, there's this haunting thread, and it's kids shaped not just by war, but by what's left after, the silence and the absence. The people they needed most disappeared into ideals and causes. And these kids, they might not grow up to be grateful. They could grow up to be angry. And maybe they should. Yes, Star Wars has always been about found family, but this new era, it's about what happens when the original one fractures and no one sticks around to clean up the mess. How will these kids grow up? Will they be the next heroes like Luke and Leia? Or will they be something much more darker, like Darth Vader? All right, so now we're going to get into some what ifs, okay? And some of these may get unhinged, and some of them you may also be curious about. But let's sit in the gray for a second, because Andor doesn't deal in fan service, it deals in fallout. And that's going to leave some unanswered questions. So one of my what ifs is, what if Lucien lived long enough to see Rogue One? Would he have let Hope take the wheel or burned it for parts? What if Syril had been recruited by the rebellion after he was fired? Would he have been less obsessive or just dangerous in a different uniform? So at the end of the series, we see that Dedra appears to be in a prison similar to the one that radicalized Cassian. So my what if for her is, what if she ends up getting radicalized in that prison in the same way that Cassian did? I mean, her story can't be over. You know, I feel like someone like that doesn't go out quietly. And then my next what if is about all of the abandoned kids, right? So what if one of these abandoned kids, whether it's Mon's daughter, Luthen's many casualties, and anyone shaped in silence, what if they don't grow up inspired, but what if they grow up angry? What if they become maybe even the architects of the First Order, you know, trained by trauma, fueled by resentment? I think that would be really interesting to explore, because if the rebellion made ghosts, the next generation might become the Haunt. So that brings me to some of the lingering questions that I still have from this series. And I just want to say, I still think this series is great, and they touched upon something really interesting for Star Wars. But some of the questions that still haunt me is, what happened to Cinta? Like, obviously we know she died, but like, what broke her before that? She seemed to have a conversation with Val that implied that something happened to her that caused her to walk away. And I'm very curious what that was, right? My next one is Kino Loy actually dead? Like, we know he couldn't swim, but this is Star Wars. If Maul survived being cut in half and Palpatine can return, I mean, he could not be dead too. Like, did someone push him in the water and maybe he was able to escape somehow? Or is he still in the prison? Like, I want to know what happened to him. What about Namek? Is it Namek or Nemec? I can't remember. But like, was he force sensitive? I mean, he was that sweet radical philosopher that gave Cassian his manifesto, if you don't remember. And I felt like he died too soon. But the way he said he felt shifts in the galaxy, the way he predicted change, it was kind of eerie to look back on. You know, he had no lightsaber, no training, obviously, but those things from what we learned from the franchise now, it doesn't make you not force sensitive, right? So I'm curious if he had some type of force sensitivity. What happened to Cassian's sister? Season 1, he was set on the path that he is now because he was looking for his sister. Like, none of this show would have happened had he not gone looking for his sister and killed those 2 officers. So what happened to her? Where is she? Is she still alive? I know some people had some theories that she could be Clea. I think that has been debunked. You'll have to double check that. But what happened to her? And then my last question is, what happened to Luthen's relics? Like, we saw ISB raid his gallery in season 2, obviously, and they boxed it up and probably are going to put it away for evidence. But some of those pieces that he had, they hinted at like possibly some Jedi relics, maybe even Sith. Like, what happens to all of those items and how they could be potentially used by the Empire? I think it would be really interesting to explore that. So I enjoyed Andor. I thought it was a great series. It was interesting to get more of this political background for Star Wars. Andor didn't give us magic. It gave us consequences. It wasn't a Jedi-focused story. There were no chosen ones, just tired people trying to survive under a system built to erase them. And it asks what rebellions actually cost. This show wasn't about inspiring the galaxy, I think, per se. It was about the people who lit the match, knowing they never lived long enough to see the fire catch. And in the quiet moments, it asks, is freedom still worth it if it costs you everything? I don't have all the answers, but Andor made me sit with that question, and that's why it worked. So thank you so much for listening to Thanks, I'll Take It From Here. Don't forget, rebellion doesn't start with a spark. It starts when someone says, not like this, not anymore. And that's something we can start incorporating in our lives right now. So I will catch you next time. And remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and YouTube at Take It From Here Pod. See you guys later.